My name is Eleanor Vance, and I am 33 years old, calling Portland, Oregon my home. For as long as I can remember, I have found my peace and passion in the intricate dance between nature and design, turning overlooked spaces into vibrant havens. I am a landscape designer, a creator of beauty and order from what often seems like chaos, meticulously planning every curve of a path, every bloom of a flower, every shade of green in a garden. My work is not just about plants. It is about crafting environments where people can find solace, joy, and a sense of belonging. I poured my heart into every project, seeing each one as a small piece of a larger dream, a dream that extended to my personal life, a dream of building a stable, loving home, perhaps with a little garden of my own where children might one day play. I pictured my life as a carefully cultivated landscape, full of light and growth, a place of peace and true connection. I was not naive. I understood that life had its storms, but I believed in the fundamental goodness of people, in the possibility of genuine partnership, in the power of love to build and sustain. My world felt secure, even idyllic, especially with Leo Blackwood by my side. Leo, a charming, aspiring actor with a captivating smile and a quick wit, had walked into my life 2 years ago, sweeping me off my feet with grand gestures and whispered promises of a shared future. He was 30 years old, 3 years my junior, but he carried himself with an air of seasoned experience, making me feel cherished and understood. We had moved in together almost immediately, a testament to what I believed was the intensity and rightness of our connection. Our apartment, a cozy space filled with books, art, and the scent of the fresh herbs I grew on our small balcony, felt like a true home. We cooked together, we laughed, we shared our dreams. He spoke endlessly about his acting ambitions, and I, ever supportive, dedicated myself to helping him in any way I could, from reviewing his audition tapes to connecting him with my friends who worked in creative fields. I was his biggest cheerleader, investing my time, my energy, and my modest savings into his pursuits, truly believing that his success would be our success, that his joy would be our joy. Our conversations often revolved around our future, children, a house with a big garden, and I felt a profound sense of contentment, a deep belief that I had found my person, my partner for life. Just last March, the air around us seemed to hum with unspoken excitement. He had taken me to a small, independent jewelry store in the heart of Portland, its windows gleaming with delicate rings. We spent hours there, holding up glittering diamonds to the light, discussing cuts and settings, imagining which one would someday adorn my finger. It was a tangible step towards the future we had so often discussed, a confirmation of the promises he had made to both our families over Christmas, that an engagement was on the horizon this year. My heart swelled with happiness and anticipation. I truly believed we were happier than we had ever been, building something beautiful, strong, and enduring. I replayed the conversations in my mind, the way he had looked at me, the warmth in his voice as he spoke about our forever. I felt a sense of calm certainty, a deep and abiding peace that settled in my bones. I was so sure, so absolutely convinced, that I had found my happily ever after. Then, a week later, the carefully cultivated garden of my life began to wither, slowly at first, then rapidly decaying into a barren wasteland. The first crack appeared, subtle, almost imperceptible, but enough to let in a chilling draft. He confessed, casually, as if recounting a mundane errand, that he had engaged in a threesome with a married couple. The words hit me like a physical blow, stealing the air from my lungs. My mind reeled, trying to process the information, to reconcile it with the man I thought I knew, the man who had just a week prior been discussing engagement rings with me. The betrayal stung, raw and immediate, but it was the next revelation that truly shattered my reality. He then admitted that he had gotten permission from the husband to sleep with the wife right before Christmas, just as we were telling our families about our upcoming engagement. An ongoing emotional affair, he called it, an insidious rot that had been festering beneath the surface of our seemingly perfect life for months. This wasn't a one-time mistake. This was a calculated, prolonged deception, a mockery of every promise, every shared dream, every tender moment we had ever experienced. The woman, he said, was someone he had met through a mutual friend at a party. He justified it, of course, with vague, convoluted explanations about exploring himself and unmet needs, words that rang hollow and cold in the face of my rapidly crumbling world. My initial reaction was a whirlwind of emotions: shock, disbelief, a searing pain that felt like my heart was being torn open. How could the man who spoke of forever with me, who held my hand and looked into my eyes, be capable of such profound deceit? The landscape of my life, once orderly and beautiful, was now a jagged, chaotic mess, choked with the weeds of betrayal. The days that followed were a blur of tears and confusion. He moved out of our shared bedroom, claiming he needed space, and for a month, he expertly gaslighted me, twisting the narrative until I, desperate for an explanation, began to believe that my trust issues were the problem, the ultimate cause of our relationship ending. He would sit across from me, his eyes filled with a feigned concern, telling me that my insecurities were pushing him away, that my need for reassurance was suffocating him. He made me question my sanity, my perception of reality. Every tear I shed, every tremor in my voice was, in his twisted logic, further proof of my unhealthy attachment. I spent countless hours dissecting my own past, my childhood, searching for the root of these imaginary trust issues, blaming myself for everything. I meticulously replayed every conversation, every interaction, desperate to identify where I had gone wrong, how I had pushed him away. I lost 13 pounds during this agonizing month, my appetite vanishing, replaced by a constant knot of anxiety in my stomach. I would lie in bed, day after day, week after week, watching him get ready, whistling a jaunty tune, dressing impeccably before he left to go on dates with other women. He would glance at me, tear-streaked and hollow-eyed, curled beneath the covers, and offer a dismissive shrug, as if my suffering was merely an inconvenient backdrop to his exciting new life. He would come home late, smelling faintly of unfamiliar perfume, and tell me, with a casualness that bordered on cruelty, about the wonderful evening he had just had. Each word was a fresh wound, each night a descent into a deeper, darker pit of despair. I felt myself wasting away, losing my grip on everything I thought I knew, shrinking into a shadow of my former self. The pain was physical, a constant ache in my chest, a dull throb behind my eyes. I walked around in a fog, barely able to perform my work, canceling appointments, isolating myself from my friends and family because I was too ashamed, too raw to face them. I believed I was breaking, truly and utterly breaking, and he was perfectly content to watch it happen, even to accelerate it with his cruel manipulations. He had stripped me of my self-worth, leaving me feeling like an empty shell, a hollowed-out vessel. The landscape of my soul, once blooming with hope, was now a desolate, parched desert. Then came my birthday, a day that should have been filled with joy, but instead became the final, brutal blow that cracked open my carefully constructed facade of self-blame. On that day, as I sat alone, trying to summon the strength to even get out of bed, he finally told me the truth, or at least a portion of it, with a chilling lack of remorse. "Eleanor," he said, standing over my bed, his voice devoid of emotion, "I've been having a sexual affair." Not an affair, but a sexual affair, as if it was a singular event, minimizing the vast landscape of his deception. He offered no apology, no explanation, just that cold, hard statement. It was a partial truth, delivered with the callousness of a surgeon performing a necessary but painful procedure, except this was not for my benefit. It was for his. It was meant to be the final word, the reason for our split, something concrete to explain away my suffering without truly exposing the full extent of his depravity. But it was enough. The fog of gaslighting began to lift, replaced by a searing clarity. The pieces clicked into place, not just the affair he admitted to, but the ones he hadn't. His constant need for privacy with his phone, the late nights, the vague excuses, the way he would suddenly become distant or irritable. It all made a horrifying kind of sense. My despair, which had felt boundless, began to morph into something else, something cold and sharp. Curiosity, sharp and undeniable, overcame the lingering traces of pain. I needed answers, not just for myself, but to understand the full scope of the monster I had allowed into my life, into my home, into my heart. Later that day, unable to resist the pull of my growing suspicions, I did the unthinkable. I knew it was wrong, a violation of privacy, but a powerful instinct told me I had to see for myself, to uncover the hidden depths of his deception. I waited until he left for one of his auditions, which I now suspected were thinly veiled dates. My hands trembled as I picked up his iPad, a device he often left lying around, oblivious to the fact that I knew his passcodes from our shared life. The screen flickered to life, and I immediately navigated to his text messages, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. What I found was not just a crack in my world, but a gaping chasm, an endless void of betrayal. It was an overwhelming flood of evidence, a dizzying array of conversations, each one a fresh stab to my already wounded soul. I scrolled endlessly, my eyes scanning the names, the dates, the content of the messages. He was not just texting a few women. He was actively communicating with 27 different women, each conversation a meticulously crafted lie, a performance designed to ensnare and manipulate. My breath hitched in my throat as I read through the sickening details. One moment, he was telling a girl in her early 20s, whom he had met a mere 12 days prior, that he was deeply in love with her, that he wanted to move in with her, to run away and start a new life together. The words, "You are my destiny, my soulmate," jumped off the screen, identical to the flowery phrases he had once used on me. My stomach churned with a mixture of nausea and rage. How could he parrot such profound sentiments so casually, so cruelly to so many? In the very next breath, in another chat, he was sending explicit sexual content to a different woman, brazenly setting up a hookup for that very night. It was a dizzying, sickening display of emotional and sexual promiscuity, a conveyor belt of deception, each woman a temporary conquest, a disposable pawn in his elaborate game. I discovered he was using different aliases on various dating apps, creating intricate backstories for each persona. He had separate burner phones for certain women, which he meticulously hid, but the texts to them somehow rooted back to his iPad as well. He was juggling these relationships with an alarming level of expertise, making each woman feel special, unique, the only one. He would memorize their birthdays, their favorite colors, their obscure interests, all to weave a more convincing web of lies. There were messages discussing weekend trips planned with one, while simultaneously coordinating spontaneous, late-night visits to another. He even had a color-coded system in his notes app, detailing which lie he told to which woman, which future he promised to whom, a chilling testament to his methodical villainy. I spent hours poring over the texts, my fingers aching from scrolling, my eyes burning. The more I read, the more the shock transformed into a cold, determined fury. This was not about my trust issues. This was about his fundamental lack of integrity, his pathological need to deceive and exploit. He wasn't just a cheater. He was a predator, a master manipulator who fed on the hopes and vulnerabilities of others. My own pain, immense as it was, began to recede, replaced by a profound sense of responsibility towards these other women, these unwitting victims of his cruel game. He had shattered my world, but he was actively, deliberately shattering theirs too, one false promise at a time. I felt a surge of protectiveness, a burning desire to warn them, to spare them the agony I had endured. With a clear, steady hand, I began to write down every phone number, every social media handle, every snippet of identifying information I could find for each of the women. The list grew longer and longer, a testament to his staggering depravity. 42 names, 42 lives he was toying with, not just 27 as I initially thought. It was an overwhelming number, but it only solidified my resolve. I felt a profound shift within me, from a broken woman consumed by self-pity to someone driven by a newfound purpose. This was not just about me anymore. It was about exposing a monster. I also stumbled upon damning evidence of his long-term manipulative behavior. One of the women I found on his iPad, a former acquaintance of his from years ago, had kept old direct messages from him. As I dug deeper into his archived conversations, I found threads from when we had first moved in together, messages where he was actively attempting to arrange casual hookups with other women, even going so far as to describe me as his convenient roommate to them. He had been trying to cheat on me from the very beginning, even before the concept of an emotional affair with the married woman came into play. He had never intended to be with me, not truly. He was only ever using me for a cheaper place to stay, for the stability I offered, and because he believed I could help his acting career. He had seen me not as a partner, but as a stepping stone, a means to an end. He was a parasite, feeding off my resources, my connections, my genuine love and support, all while laughing behind my back. The realization was a gut punch, but it also brought a strange clarity. The man I loved had never existed. He was a carefully constructed facade, and I had fallen for his most convincing role. Every memory, every shared moment was now tainted with the bitter taste of his calculated deceit. The sheer audacity of his charade, his willingness to lie so comprehensively and for so long, ignited a cold, unwavering fury within me. I knew then, with absolute certainty, that I could not let him continue his reign of emotional terror unchecked. I would expose him. I would warn every single woman. I would dismantle his carefully constructed house of cards. I felt a surge of grim satisfaction knowing that once I went public, a lot more concrete evidence would surely surface, shedding light on what was truly happening during our entire relationship. This was not just revenge. It was an act of justice, a warning, a desperate plea to others not to fall for the same trap. The very next day, armed with my grim list of names and numbers, I met up with two women I had discovered through the T app, a local gossip and social networking platform where people often shared anonymous warnings about problematic individuals. They had reached out to me after my initial, desperate, cryptic post about my situation, recognizing the pattern. They had both had dealings with Leo in the past, their experiences chillingly similar to mine, although neither had been in a long-term relationship with him. They were seasoned in recognizing his particular brand of charm and manipulation, having narrowly escaped his deeper clutches. We sat in a quiet coffee shop in southeast Portland, the scent of roasting beans doing little to calm the storm brewing inside me. I laid out my findings, showing them the extensive list, the text messages, the promises he had made to others. Their eyes widened with a mixture of disbelief and grim recognition. One of them, a fierce, no-nonsense woman named Clara, recounted how Leo had tried to string her along for months, promising a serious relationship while dating several other women simultaneously, all of whom she later discovered through mutual friends. The other, a quiet but insightful woman named Sarah, spoke of his uncanny ability to make her feel like the most important person in the world, only to vanish for days without explanation, leaving her riddled with self-doubt. They understood. They truly understood the insidious nature of his gaslighting, the way he chipped away at a woman's self-esteem until she was barely recognizable. Together, we began to formulate the message, carefully choosing each word to be impactful, factual, and impossible for him to deny. We wanted it to be a warning, a cold, hard dose of reality for every woman he was currently ensnaring. We brainstormed the most effective way to disseminate the information, discussing the pros and cons of various platforms, settling on a multi-pronged approach to maximize reach. We talked about the potential fallout, the anger, the disbelief, but mostly the relief that we hoped to bring to those who had been caught in his web. We knew this would be an explosion, a public reckoning, but it was a necessary one. I also resolved to create a couple of different TikTok videos, detailing the entire situation, making it as public as possible, not just for these women, but as a general warning for any woman he might encounter throughout his life. I had poured so much into this relationship, financially, emotionally, physically. I had truly bought into the fact that we were in a loving, healthy relationship, that we were getting married. I felt so incredibly blindsided, used, and naive. If I could save other girls, even one other girl, from feeling this way, from wasting their time, from getting their hearts broken, I would consider it all worth it. The thought of preventing someone else from enduring this specific brand of pain was a powerful motivator, a balm to my own wounded spirit. The revenge, however, couldn't happen immediately. We were still living together, a cruel twist of fate that made every day a fresh torment. I had to wait until the day he moved out, not knowing what repercussions this massive exposure would entail. Living under the same roof as my betrayer, while meticulously planning his downfall, was a bizarre and emotionally draining experience. I forced myself to maintain a veneer of polite indifference, walking on eggshells, pretending that I was slowly, gracefully moving on, even as every fiber of my being screamed with rage and a desperate need for justice. I watched him pack his boxes, his belongings, his life into crates and bags, his movements casual, as if he were simply transitioning to another convenient arrangement, another temporary stop on his selfish journey. Each box he taped shut felt like another nail in the coffin of my past life. Yet it also brought a perverse sense of anticipation for the new one I was forging. He would occasionally make small talk, asking about my day, offering insincere apologies for the mess of our breakup, still attempting to subtly shift the blame onto my supposed emotional fragility. I would nod, offer curt replies, my mind racing with the details of my plan, a silent countdown ticking in my head. I became a master of camouflage, hiding my true intentions behind a wall of feigned apathy. It was excruciating to pretend, to share the same air, the same space, with the man who had so thoroughly decimated my trust and my future. I saw him chatting on his phone, making plans, arranging dates, his charming smile on display even for strangers on the street. Each sight fueled my resolve. I spent those weeks biding my time, meticulously building my case, documenting every detail of his ongoing deceptions. I kept a detailed list of every woman he contacted, every meeting he scheduled, every false promise he made, adding it all to the growing dossier of information I was preparing to send to his unwitting victims. This was not a rash act. It was a carefully orchestrated symphony of truth, designed to shatter his carefully constructed illusion. I was a woman scorned, yes, but I was also a woman awakened, reborn from the ashes of betrayal. He had taken everything from me, my peace, my trust, my sense of security, my dreams. But in doing so, he had also, inadvertently, given me something else, nothing left to lose. And with nothing left to lose, there was nothing to stop me from unleashing the full force of a long-simmering fury. This would not be a quiet fade-out. This would be a spectacular, undeniable crash. The waiting felt like an eternity, each day a slow, agonizing crawl towards the inevitable explosion. I continued to live with Leo, an emotional ghost in our shared apartment, meticulously documenting his every move, every new name that popped up on his phone. The list of women grew, reaching a staggering 42 by the time he finally packed his last box. My initial goal of 27 seemed quaint in comparison to the sheer scale of his deception. I would pretend to be absorbed in my work, sketching garden designs on my tablet, but my ears would be perked, listening for his hushed phone conversations, catching glimpses of new names on his screen, noting down times and dates. He was a creature of habit, often leaving his phone unattended when he took a shower or stepped out for a quick errand, and I took advantage of every opportunity, quickly scrolling through recent messages, making mental notes, sometimes even snapping a quick photo of a particularly damning conversation if I felt confident I wouldn't be caught. I knew this was dangerous, but the urgency to gather comprehensive evidence outweighed my fear. I saw the pictures he exchanged with these women, the intimate details they shared, the vulnerabilities they exposed, all while he maintained a facade of unwavering devotion to each of them. It sickened me to my core, but it also solidified my resolve. Each new discovery was another layer of paint stripped away from his false exterior, revealing the rotten wood beneath. I discovered he was actively scouting locations for an OnlyFans account, discussing with a collaborator how to shoot content, even brainstorming marketing angles. He was planning to monetize his conquests, perhaps even selling the private content he coerced from these unsuspecting women. This revelation added another dimension to his depravity, transforming him from a mere philanderer into something far more sinister, an exploiter. I kept this information close, a bitter secret, knowing it would be a powerful weapon if ever needed. But for now, My focus remained on exposing his emotional and romantic deceptions. The toll on me, living in this state of constant surveillance and suppressed rage, was immense. My already fragile body continued to waste away. The 13 pounds I lost now felt like a distant memory as I continued to shed more. My clothes hung loosely on my frame, and my reflection in the mirror often startled me: hollow eyes, pale skin, a gauntness that spoke volumes about my internal turmoil. Sleep became a luxury I rarely afforded myself, my nights filled with restless tossing and turning, my mind replaying scenes of betrayal, strategizing, perfecting the execution of my plan. My dreams were vivid, nightmarish landscapes of crumbling foundations and poisoned flowers. During the day, a dull headache throbbed behind my eyes, a constant companion. My hands would shake uncontrollably at times, especially when I was alone, processing the sheer volume of his deceit. I forced myself to eat small, unappetizing meals, knowing I needed to maintain some strength, but food held no appeal. The taste of victory, however, was already beginning to form on my tongue, a potent, addictive flavor. I knew that the day he finally left, I would unleash the full force of my wrath, but until then, I had to endure. It was a prolonged form of psychological torture, sharing living space with the man who had destroyed my life, yet it also sharpened my focus, honing my anger into a precise surgical instrument. He would move freely, happily, planning his next conquests, oblivious to the storm gathering around him, a storm I was meticulously brewing. I would see him on his phone, laughing, whispering sweet nothings, and I would think, soon, very soon, your carefully constructed world will shatter. I reached out to a few more women I had found on his phone, cautiously, using a burner number, testing the waters. I found more who had similar stories, women he had strung along, promised futures to, only to abandon them when a newer, shinier prospect appeared. Each new connection cemented my belief that I was doing the right thing, that this was not just about my pain, but about a widespread pattern of abuse that needed to be stopped. My circle of allies grew, a small but determined network of women who had all, in their own ways, been victims of Leo Blackwood. Their shared pain, strangely, made me feel less alone, less like an isolated fool. We exchanged stories, validated each other's experiences, and together we strengthened the resolve to bring him down. The silence from his family and friends, after my initial, more subtle attempts to reach out, had been deafening. I had sent a private message to his mother, his brother, and a few close friends, gently outlining some of his more troubling behaviors, hoping for some acknowledgement, some sign that someone in his life would hold him accountable. The messages were polite, factual, devoid of accusation, simply stating my concerns and observations. I received no responses, not a single one. It was a disheartening blow, making me feel even more isolated, confirming that he was indeed a master manipulator, even to those closest to him, or perhaps they simply chose to ignore the truth. This utter lack of response left me with a bitter taste in my mouth, solidifying my belief that if anything was to be done, it had to be done by me, and it had to be public. This was a bridge burned, I knew, but it was a bridge that wasn't truly mine to begin with. The silence from his loved ones, the continued presence of his deceptive charisma in my home, the growing list of his victims, all contributed to a crushing sense of defeat that settled over me in the final days before his departure. I felt completely depleted, used, and utterly hopeless. All my efforts to understand, to cope, to even subtly warn, seemed to have failed. The prospect of exposing him, while still my driving force, felt like an insurmountable task against such a deeply entrenched pattern of deceit. I was a landscape designer, accustomed to bringing order to chaos, but this chaos felt too vast, too personal, too deeply ingrained. I felt like I was drowning, my carefully constructed life sinking beneath waves of his lies. All the progress I thought I was making internally, turning my pain into purpose, seemed to vanish in moments of profound despair. What if he simply shrugged it off? What if the women didn't believe me? What if I only ended up looking like a bitter, jealous ex? These doubts gnawed at me, making me question my every move, every decision. The thought of him walking away from this, unscathed, continued to live his life of endless deception, while I was left picking up the pieces of my shattered existence, was a torment worse than anything. This was my lowest point, a moment where I truly felt that all might be lost, and that I was utterly alone in this fight. Then, last Sunday, the air in our apartment shifted, not subtly, but with a palpable sense of finality. Leo Blackwood moved out. I watched him go, his car loaded with his belongings, driving away into the Portland afternoon, leaving behind a silence that was both deafening and liberating. A profound exhaustion settled over me, the kind that permeates your bones after a long, arduous battle. But beneath the weariness, a spark ignited, a cold, clear flame of resolve. The waiting was over. The game had begun. I spent the next few hours, not resting but preparing, meticulously checking my lists, ensuring every detail was perfect. The message, crafted with Clara and Sarah, was ready. It was direct, factual, and backed by undeniable evidence. It began by stating my name and my relationship with Leo, then moved swiftly to the purpose of the communication, to expose the truth about his multifaceted deceptions. It detailed his lies, his promises to multiple women, and provided specific examples that could be cross-referenced by the recipients. We included screenshots of conversations, dated and time-stamped, carefully chosen to protect the privacy of the other women while clearly demonstrating Leo's pattern of behavior. The message ended with a simple, clear warning. He is a serial deceiver. Do not let him waste your time or break your heart as he did mine and so many others. We also included a statement encouraging them to share their own experiences if they felt comfortable, and provided an email address for a support group we had quietly set up. The next morning, with the first light filtering through my living room window, I executed the plan. My hands were steady, my mind clear. I opened the group chat I had meticulously assembled over weeks, adding the 42 phone numbers I had painstakingly collected. 42 women, each a potential victim, each deserving of the truth. I typed the final few words of the message, then took a deep breath and pressed send. The messages went out, a digital tidal wave of truth unleashed upon Leo's carefully constructed world of lies. Within minutes, my phone began to buzz, then vibrate incessantly, an overwhelming deluge of notifications. The responses were immediate and overwhelmingly positive. Shock, anger, and immense gratitude poured in from women across the city, across the country. One woman, whom Leo had told he was in love with and was planning to move in with, replied with a string of expletives and a single powerful word: "Thank you." Another, who had a flight booked to visit him in the next couple of days, messaged me directly to say she had canceled her flight, her words laced with relief and fury. "You saved me from a nightmare," she wrote. "I can't believe I almost fell for it." Tears welled in my eyes, not of sadness, but of a strange, profound satisfaction. I had done it. I had pulled back the curtain on his performance, exposed the ugly truth. There was not one single negative message, not one accusation of jealousy or bitterness. Only gratitude, only shared outrage. It was a powerful validation, a testament to the fact that his charade had indeed been widespread and devastating. My heart, which had felt like a shriveled thing for so long, began to expand, filled with a warmth I hadn't felt in months. That same morning, I also sent out a separate, more detailed message to his mother, his brother, and his closest friends, outlining the full scope of his behavior, including his rampant infidelity, his gaslighting, and his financial exploitation. I provided specific examples and included links to the group chat, allowing them to see the collective testimony of his victims. I did not expect a response, and I received none. The silence from his family and friends, while disappointing, was not surprising. It confirmed what I already knew. They were either complicit in his enabling or simply unwilling to confront the ugly truth of who he truly was. This bridge was burned definitively, but it was a bridge I no longer cared to cross. My focus was on the women, on the lives I could help save. I then turned my attention to social media. I went through my Instagram account, deleting all of our shared photos, erasing every trace of him from my digital life. On one particularly cute video I had made of us during happier times, a montage of our adventures, I changed the caption, transforming it from a loving memory into a stark warning. I explained, succinctly, what had happened, urging any women who might have encountered him to reach out to me, hinting at the vastness of his deception. Within hours, a woman reached out. She had plans to meet up with him when she was back in town later that week, a casual coffee date. She had seen my post, recognized his face, and immediately blocked him. "Thank you, Eleanor," she wrote, her message a mixture of shock and relief. "I had a weird feeling, but I would have gone. You saved me." We made plans to grab coffee when she returned to Portland, a new connection forged from shared pain. The ripple effect was immediate, tangible. Leo, for his part, remained silent. No word from him, no angry texts, no desperate phone calls. His silence, I knew, spoke volumes. It confirmed the validity of everything I had said, every truth I had exposed. He had no defense, no counterargument against the undeniable proof. He untagged himself in all of our remaining photos on Instagram, a small, futile act of self-preservation, but it was a clear indication that he knew, that he saw the storm I had unleashed. He was retreating, perhaps in shock, perhaps in shame, perhaps simply to regroup and concoct his next scheme. But for now, he was silent, and that silence was my sweetest victory. We are now 24 hours into everything, and the digital world is buzzing. I decided to go massively public, taking the story beyond the group chat. I put videos on my TikTok account, detailing most of the story, keeping some of the most sensitive information to myself for the time being. Information like his plans for 2 different OnlyFans accounts, complete with graphics he was workshopping, and the sex parties he was attending. I felt a strange loyalty, a flicker of humanity, in holding back those specific details, feeling it was a line too far to cross into explicit personal details, though I had told the women in the group chat about it so they had the full picture. My videos, raw and honest, spread rapidly across the platform, garnering thousands of views, comments, and shares. The hashtag #LeoBlackwoodExposed started trending locally in Portland. I recounted the story from the beginning, from the engagement ring shopping to the gaslighting, to the discovery of the 42 women. My voice, initially shaky, grew stronger with each word, each shared detail. The comments were overwhelmingly supportive, validating my experience, sharing their own stories of similar betrayals. It was a cathartic experience, transforming my personal pain into a collective roar against deception. I kept some of the details to myself, like the full extent of his OnlyFans plans and the sex parties he was attending. It felt like a small, final boundary, a decision rooted in a strange sense of decency, even for him. I had, however, provided those details to the women in the group chat, ensuring they had the full, unvarnished picture of his lifestyle. The sheer number of women, 42, truly shocked many people. I saw comments questioning if it was even possible if my story could be real. But Leo is a very good-looking guy, effortlessly charming, with an innate ability to make anyone feel like the most important person in the room. He's everyone's exception, the one who makes you believe he's different, the one who can make all your dreams come true. He was mine, and he was most of theirs. He gets away with a lot, has gotten away with a lot his entire life, and I think this is probably the first time in his life he's ever been truly held accountable for anything. The silence from him continues, a profound void where I expected rage or denial. He still hasn't said anything to me directly, and I don't think he ever will again. His untagging himself from our shared Instagram photos, his continued silence, speaks volumes, a tacit admission of guilt. I am sure this is just the beginning of the unraveling, that the consequences will continue to ripple outward, touching every corner of his carefully constructed reality. As the days turned into weeks, the initial flurry of activity began to settle into a new, strange rhythm. The group chat, initially a place of raw anger and shared shock, transformed into a supportive community. We exchanged stories, tips on healing, even recommendations for therapists. Some of the women formed smaller subgroups, meeting up for coffee or drinks, forging new friendships from the ashes of their shared heartbreak. I found myself connecting deeply with many of them, particularly with Clara and Sarah, who had become my steadfast allies. We continued to monitor the situation, exchanging any new information that surfaced, adding to the ever-growing dossier of Leo's past deceptions. My own healing progressed steadily. The constant knot of anxiety in my stomach began to loosen, replaced by a quiet strength. My appetite returned, slowly at first, then with a healthy vigor, and I began to gain back the weight I had so tragically lost. My work, which had suffered so much during my ordeal, became a source of renewed joy and focus. I poured my energy into designing beautiful, resilient landscapes, reflecting the new strength I found within myself. I had transformed from a heartbroken victim into an empowered advocate, using my voice and my experience to help others avoid the pain I had endured. One evening, as I was sitting on my porch, enjoying the cool Portland air, my phone buzzed with a message from a number I didn't recognize. It was from a woman named Chloe, one of the 42. Her message was brief, urgent, and sent a chill down my spine. "Eleanor," it read, "I found something. An old friend just sent me a link. It's an explicit video, and I think it's me." My breath caught in my throat. My stomach dropped. The OnlyFans accounts, the graphics, the mention of selling sex tapes. I had held back those details in my public exposure, not wanting to cross what felt like a line into excessive personal revelation. But now, the line had been crossed by him in the most horrific way possible. My phone buzzed again. "It's on a shady, private website," Chloe continued, her words tumbling out in a torrent of fear and anger. "And there are others. I recognized one of the women from your group chat. We sent him nudes. We made videos. We trusted him." The world, which I thought had just settled into a new sense of order, was once again thrown into a dizzying spin. The feeling of closure, of justice served, dissipated like smoke. Leo's depravity, it turned out, ran even deeper than I had initially imagined. My revenge, while successful in exposing his lies and saving many women from further heartbreak, had only scratched the surface of his true villainy. The poetic consequence of his lies being exposed was sweet, but this new revelation was chilling. He hadn't just broken hearts, he had violated privacy, exploited trust, and potentially engaged in illegal activities. The work, it seemed, was not over. My initial fulfillment was now tinged with a fresh wave of righteous fury. There was a deeper, darker battle to be fought, not just for emotional justice, but for the safety and dignity of every woman he had ever manipulated. And I, Eleanor Vance, the landscape designer who brought order to chaos, was ready for the next, far more dangerous chapter.